So, what do you want me to do about it? Okay, this is it. I'm going to give you your admonition, then you can go watch the game. I want you to speak up, act up, and step up. Speak up. Family, friends, colleagues, everybody. I want them all to know it's not an obesity epidemic, it's twin epidemics of what? Oh, come on. Wait a minute. We may be going back to the third slide if you don't get your act together. It's not an obesity epidemic, it's an epidemic of?
Poor nutrition.
Physical inactivity and poor nutrition. I heard at least 3 people say it. I'm going to give it to you. No, you did well. You did well. That's fine. Let's make sure we change the conversation. And everybody's got to hear that again and again and again, so we understand those are the 2 things we're trying to change. So when somebody says, why are you guys pushing so hard to finish that trail? Why are you pushing so hard to add these bicycle lanes or to make this a more walkable downtown district? Because we're fighting that epidemic of inactivity. And I want you to act up and step up. So let's talk about act up. I wrote this article for the journal Childhood Obesity, which I wish was named Childhood Inactivity and Poor Nutrition. And they asked me, hey, look, talk about, I do, really. I mean, that should be the right title. Let's talk about what we're going to try to change. The article essentially invited me to talk about what I thought the most promising opportunities were to fight the epidemic in this country. And I said it's this kind of stuff, changing our planning and zoning, complete streets, transportation trails. So let me talk about each of these very quickly. I think I've said this enough, but we've got to show up and really try to change our style of both residential and retail, commercial, business design. And we know that the businesses will do it. So that's a Subway inside with housing above it. And this is a Barnes & Noble in Terre Haute, Indiana. And the only reason I'm telling you is that the developer there was ready to build this out on the perimeter right next to the Home Depot and the Walmart and sort of all the box stuff on the edge, because that's where we build those. But when Terre Haute said to them, no, 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 come downtown next to Indiana State University and make it multi-story and put apartments and or businesses above it, make more money on the parcel to make up for the fact that it's higher value property, right, coming in town versus out on the cheap land on the edge, they said, yeah. The model, it's old, there's Ellicott, but it's a model that we know works and can be scaled from 2-story Main Street downtown Village to, very urban downtown Columbia. And think about your zoning ordinance reflect what you say in your plan. So you have this Plan Howard 2030 plan, which is sort of a multi-decade plan that talks about trying to minimize the kind of sprawl growth that happens out here in the western part of the county and concentrate it in village centers and towns. So Columbia, but also Elk Ridge, North Laurel, the Route 1 corridor. Well, you've got to actually implement that. You've actually got to have their zoning ordinances reflect that, and then have the boards, when it comes to permit time, not grant waivers, but actually require that. Create these critical masses of clusters. These are not easy things to do. But the development community is interested in it, and you have staff, planning and transportation. I know that because some of them are in the room right now who are talking about it, and I got to visit with them earlier. They're working on this stuff. They're still going to need your support when the road gets bumpy, which guarantee you it will. You are not going to just blithely leap into this style of design with everybody happy. It doesn't happen that way, because it's a change. It's a change from how we've been doing it, and it doesn't mean you're off the hook. One of the simple things that we're asking people to do is what's called a multimodal transportation analysis. Every time you go build something new like that, or a new Walmart, or a new whatever, we typically do what's called a transportation impact analysis, or TIA, traffic impact analysis, I should say. And what we do is count the number of potential car trips that will be in and out, and if they're enough to affect traffic, we might require or work with the developer on building turn lanes and a stoplight and things like that. Well, the reality is, we really should ask them to count the number of pedestrian, bicycle, and transit trips too, shouldn't we? Which I would call a multimodal transportation analysis. Count all 4 modes. And there are design and engineering firms, some of them represented in this very room, that could do that for you and help you understand where the potential is, so that maybe we don't just ask for a signal light, but maybe some sidewalk connections or trail links or bike parking facilities or improvements for transit. So in this one subdivision, they did a nice job of at least making sure there was a little waiting area at the school bus stop for the kids. However, they neglected to recognize that's a library, it's 300 yards outside the entrance of the subdivision, and that maybe they should have connected the sidewalk. Which would be not a daunting cost if I've got all my equipment there. I'm not saying it would be without cost, but it wasn't an unseemly one to require of a developer who's going to make money on literally dozens of homes in there. I think that's a reasonable thing for us to start to do, which is a street is not complete unless it's been taken into account all 4 user groups, the pedestrian, bicyclist, transit, and motor vehicle. How many people here have heard the term complete streets and are aware that it is a national thing? You're all the geeks. I'm in the geek room here. So here's what I want to remind the choir. Every time we do something, even routine repaving like Shaker Drive, I've just learned is due for. right? That's going to get repaved because it's time, right? It's the permanent material. This is one of the little roundabouts that's there that's not particularly effective. It doesn't deflect the traffic very much. It's easy to roll right over it. There are other styles that are no uglier. In fact, one could argue nicer looking, but they would also be more effective. That one on the right from Madison, Wisconsin. And my only point is, when that repaving is done, we could take a look at what we've learned since this road was done about how to do those better. So I'd rather we do more horizontal rather than vertical traffic calming. It'll be easier on my head, if nothing else. Any street that has a speed table or a hump on it is a pretty good indication that we feel speeds are too fast, right? And we've retrofitted in that treatment where we should have probably done it by virtue of the design of the road in the first place. So what can we do? Let me just rattle through a rogues gallery of my ideas. What are the sort of the starter ideas toward completeness? Walk audits. We see communities taking groups out and walking the very areas and talking about that, and you're doing some of that. We often do that as part of our Safe Routes to School stuff. Walk the very routes the kids would walk to school. And then you could create an inventory of street completeness. And again, we've invited kids to do that in communities around the country where they tell us, does this street work for you? Is there enough sidewalk? Is it far enough away from the road? And so on. How about this? Start using paint more. Paint is not the be-all and end-all, but it's certainly a good entry point to this kind of work. So in this road, it's posted 25. That does not look like a 25-mile-an-hour road. That line might make it feel a little more like one, and if we put them there and created some space for a bicyclist, or at least a guideline there, even feels more so. So simply putting paint and narrowing lanes, I can't say this strongly enough after my time visiting with you, if you could just narrow some lanes in this area, your lives would be so much better. As drivers too, by the way, because, you know, thank you very much. Thank you very much. I'm be here all week. Try the veal. No, but seriously, there's a lot of asphalt out there, and if all we do is allocate it to 12 and 13 and 14-foot lanes for motor vehicles, we invite the very speed that we all then decry. We say, oh my God, people drive like crazy through here. It's one step. It doesn't solve it, but it's a step in the right direction. Let's increase, again, use paint, high visibility crossings. Again, remember my crossing from the Sheraton to the mall? Some paint there would be a start. I'm not saying it's a be-all and end-all, and maybe we need signs as well and other treatments, but it would be a start. I know this is not so much Columbia per se. I'm thinking, and much of my conversation has been county-wide, but got a lot of roads with no shoulder on them, including this one right here that tells me I'm going to see bicyclists, but has no physical accommodation for them other than, hey, watch out for the bikes. Which is okay, and if you have very skilled cyclists in that kind of 1% of what we call the strong and fearless cyclists, literally that's what it's estimated to be about 1% of the cycling community. God bless them, there they are. But what about the people that fall in any of the lesser categories of skill and fearlessness? Now, I'm not saying it is without cost, and I understand there are land acquisition issues because the right-of-way is only what you have right now. Having said that, that doesn't mean you shouldn't address this notion of trying to create shoulders where you can. And our good friend Michael Ronkin actually makes a compelling case about this. And he does a big song and dance, which I will just show you his website. And I've compiled it into a slide you're not supposed to read. His 22 reasons we should put shoulders on rural roads, none of which, if you look at this list, is anything about bicyclists and pedestrians. In other words, he would make the case, shoulders on rural roads are beneficial from a safety standpoint, from a maintenance standpoint. It's a place where vehicles can pull off. It allows cars to pass left-turning vehicles. It moves the stormwater runoff away from the edge so that it undermines the road and requires repaving less frequently. My point is, he makes a compelling argument that even the most recalcitrant engineer who says, I don't know, I'd never ride my bike out there anyway. Now, you know what I feel about that, right? I'd never ride my bike out there. You know my first answer. But the second one is, then don't do it for the bicyclists. Do it because it's actually good engineering practice. Okay? Any engineers in the room? Yeah. What do you think? Shoulders a good idea? Thank you. Well done. Good man. He's voting for it. Go to Michael's website if you want to. Bike lanes, sharrows, as we said, but also let's do a little more. Let's provide more protection. There's a growing body of evidence that says there are a lot of riders for whom that might not be adequately compelling, but a protected bike lane like this would be to get them out there. And from an expense standpoint, yeah, it's a little more expense, right? I've got the bollards rather than just the paint, but there are treatments. There's a bunch of treatments out there. This is called an advanced bike box. I think this is such a cool thing. It allows the bicyclist at the stop line to pull forward, the car stop behind them. She's now highly visible. You don't get any surprises. This is a one-way street, so that vehicle could turn left there and could clip her if she was back on held back at the bike lane at the same position, right? Just allowing her to advance changes the whole dynamic when the signal changes there. Or using curb extensions for bike parking space. And again, remember I talked about the curb extensions? Well, what if you say, Mark, it's going to be 5 years before we repave that road and could put in the curbing material and the sidewalk and the new curb ramps? Well, in the short term, could you in a neighborhood use planters or temporary curbing material and paint and signs or bollards and paint like this over here? My only point is less expensive, shorter or medium term, or for the really resistant engineers, reversible. So for the person who says, I'm just not going to do it, we say, could we try it? So go try, use that if you have to. Could we try it, please? And if it's a real disaster and the world comes to an end, we'll pull it back. We've seen communities do that successfully. How about this? Has anybody seen a parklet? These things are so cool. The idea of a sort of a mini park structure that takes up 1 or 2 parking spaces right at the curbside. On narrow sidewalks, it's wonderful. It allows for seating at restaurants and things like that, play area for kids, congregation area, just like a neighborhood park, basically. Or how about, and I talked about these earlier, the replacement of 4-way stop signs with roundabouts. And I just want to point out, include this picture to show, yes, even very large vehicles successfully navigate even very small roundabouts. And what we often do with communities that are really struggling with whether this will work or not, get the biggest fire truck in the fleet and the most disbelieving driver of that fire truck and lay it out with hay bales or cones or paint in a big parking lot and say, okay, let's try to drive the truck through. Can we do it? Right? You'll notice many times they have what are called mountable curbs so that the back wheels of the biggest tractor trailer, the occasional moving van that goes to that neighborhood, get right through. Put in median islands. Remember, once we start striping roadways and creating these medians where there's no turning movement, you can make an island. But you can't help but wonder whether a road like Little Patuxent could be given a road diet. Remember the diet I showed you before? Jennifer informed me this road carries maybe 5,000 vehicles a day. That does not need 4 lanes. We know that. I'm not even saying I've done any engineering analysis. That's enough analysis. Average daily traffic of 5,000 vehicles, no turning movements at all.
The Hickory Ridge portion.
This is the Hickory Ridge portion. Yeah, the circuit, the circular piece there. That, you could change that, is the point, with paint, basically, and bike decals. And you don't even need, where there's no turning movements, you don't even need the center turn lane, is that. What this really means, now this is a hard one, but I want you to go to bat for me. I'm begging you because I planted the seed with some of the policy folks this morning. I hope this becomes a conversation in your region, in your county. If we only had a county commissioner in the room who might champion this, I don't know. But if we did, let's just imagine we had a forward-thinking, sort of ready to lead kind of person. So that person, he or she, it could be a woman, right? So he or she, were willing to champion this to change how engineers and planners actually measured the performance of roadways. Because right now we do a thing called level of service. We measure how many cars we can move, how quickly. Level of service, that's the term they use. It's an A, B, C, D, E, F grading, like your grade on your report card. Not very dissimilar. I'm thinking, not just me, by the way, lots of people are thinking, that's a fairly old-fashioned notion, that we've got to start to think about the performance of a roadway in a far broader way, that maybe we ought to try to minimize the number of motor vehicle trips or the total vehicle miles traveled, or maybe maximize the pedestrian, bicycle, and transit trips. What if those were part of performance measure? Unless you think I'm just some wacko who's thinking about this, the state of California has just passed a law that essentially says that's what they're doing. They are no longer going to only use level of service as a measure. Isn't that mind-blowing? I mean, that's a big change, and it's so cool. And they're having a very robust conversation about how they're going to measure roadway performance in a different way now. It's really cool. Why don't you guys be the pioneers in this part of the country? Why not? Why couldn't it be Howard County? It'd be perfect for you guys to take the lead on that. While you're at it, advocate for trails and advocate for transportation trails. When you speak up about trails, in particular, focus on those links. And you need to show up and talk about this because trails can be scary to people. We don't like trails in our backyard because weird men with big, thick mustaches try to ride their bicycles down there, and they look in our windows, and they might try to steal our flat screen TVs right from the trail and run down the trail with the TV on their shoulder. And so we get the NIMBYs. You know what NIMBY stands for? Not in my backyard. Do you know what the bananas are? Absolutely right. Spread it out. I moved to Howard County's rural, so I want to maintain the rural character, build absolutely nothing anywhere near anything. And then, of course, the cave person, who is the citizen against virtually everything. They just show up to bang the table and yell at the chairman. I don't know how you got elected, Fenton, you idiot. You've got to be there to change the conversation. I tell you about this cool trail, Boone, North Carolina, connects their high school and middle school complex to a county park, which is where all of their ball fields are, and they used to have to drive to it. They've used of all things, a utility corridor. There's a sewer corridor there, right? And this trail now connects. These kids are going to a cross-country meet that would have required a bus. They would have had to, the team would have signed a bus out, right, to drive the cross-country team, on a circuitous arterial road route. But now that the trail connects directly, they walk or jog over there as their warm-up. Soccer team does the same thing. The soccer fields, the baseball fields are over there. That's a functional trail link. It's not that long, but it's actually saving them money on every bus trip that doesn't go back and forth, right? How about bike-friendly communities? Are you guys aware of the Bike-Friendly Community Awards program of the League of American Bicyclists? So there's a league, DC-based. They give these awards honorable mention, bronze, silver, gold, I think platinum, diamond are the top couple. And there are some Maryland communities. Well, first of all, there are a couple of Columbias already on the list, right? Columbia, Missouri is a silver. Columbia, South Carolina is a bronze. Columbia, Maryland, notably absent. Howard County does. That's right. The county does. And what is it? I think it's an honorable. It's not bronze yet. So fix that, raise the bar, bring it up, and get on the Columbia list. You got to be there. Rockville has one. Rockville has a bronze, I think. There's another Maryland community. Baltimore actually got a bronze. So my point is, carry on. Get in the game. And the kind of stuff you have to do is not only just stripe the physical infrastructure. You can do education programs. You can do outreach. Bike share. I love this Blue Island Bike Club, the picture in the lower right, which is a really cool program in Blue Island, suburb of Chicago, Illinois, in which low-income kids are specifically targeted. And there are 3 elements. They got to commit to a classroom section, bike maintenance and construction, assembly and maintenance, and on-road training. And at the end of it, you stake all the way through. Your graduation gift is the bike and a helmet, which you now know how to take care of because you've learned how to build and maintain it, and you know how to ride. They're raising the next generation of bicyclists. That's a cool program. And by the way, among the very kids who would be least likely to do so because they can't afford a bike. So they've been fairly successful finding sponsorship and so on because they are targeting the most at-risk kids. Just giving you a sense, that's the kind of thing that would raise the bar, and you'd go from an honorable mention to a bronze. Safe routes to school. One last story about this. Safe routes to school is really cool because the premise seems so logical. Let's encourage kids to walk and bike to school again. How many of us walked or biked to school for some substantial portion of our, right? And you saw the data about how few do now. And you may live in an environment that's more conducive or not, but we still run into the issues around it. By the way, we were so psyched to see up at Northfield Elementary all those bikes in the rack. And I would suggest to you the creation of this little trail link from the neighborhood to the school complex, avoiding what's got to be a busy intersection at arrival and dismissal time, has got to be a piece of that. It's got to be helping. So great to see. But you can do more than that. And I'll tell the story of Columbia, Missouri, that was setting up what are called walking school buses, the idea of a route to school that an adult walks, picking kids up along the way. In this case, the adults were University of Missouri students earning community service hours. So that young woman there is in the health sciences division. She's doing this as part of a health sciences practicum, walking kids to school. But there were parents who would say, I'd love to do it, but I still can't let my kid walk to school because the traffic at the school is so bad. I'm worried about the last quarter mile, the last few hundred feet even, where chaos, parents in and out, parking across the street and letting their kids walk around. I don't want my kid in that mess. So what do those parents do instead, by the way, than letting their kids walk to school? Drive, contributing to the very mess that they're complaining about. So what they did was we did a walk audit there, and in the walk audit, we realized there was a park adjoining the school, had a beautiful trail through it, including this little bridge here, and I said to them, they said, we want to try to do a remote drop-off area. We actually recognized there was some parking at the other end of this park. You wouldn't have to cross the street. You could walk through the park and you'd be on the school grounds. And it was really cool. And I said, okay, if you're really serious, they said, come on back, help us plan it. I said, only if you do a 1-week trial where you let the kids walk through the park. In other words, you have to do remote drop-off for a week. In fact, have the buses even drop off there. They only have a few buses. So drop off, as well as encourage parents to let the kids walk through the park. I'll do a focus group with the kids. Which I did right there. So we sat and had a bunch of the kids. We did a series of focus groups, had them do drawings of their experiences. And then we had a big meeting with the adults. That's the mayor. We had school board members, parents, PTA, local planning officials, and so on. And really some good outcomes. In fact, when we talked to the kids, they said, yeah, we really like doing it. We want to keep doing it. In fact, this little girl, Sierra, on the right said, well, my mom was a little nervous, and she made me promise to hold hands with my brother. You see that right there? That's her holding hands with her brother. And every kid, by the way, had a drawing of the bridge. They loved this bridge over the little creek, which is basically a drainage ditch. Oh, but it rained the week of the trial. It rained, and I thought, oh, that's going to kill me, right? Rainy week, they're not going to want to do it. Every kid said it was great. They loved it. They were throwing sticks in the water. This boy, Jarrett, said, some of the guys said they saw a bear in the woods, but I'm pretty convinced it was a dog. I'm thinking it was a dog, Mr. Fenton. And so he drew the dog into his thing. These two guys, Keyshawn and Khalil, were total characters. They went on and on about how this one's telling me he fell in the water. He's saying he fell in the water. You'll notice this kid here, the picture narrows, the pathway narrows in the distance, and the school, way up here in the corner, is quite small. And I said, so how come the picture is so small? Why does the building get small? And he says, it's called perspective. Which I thought was pretty good. So that night we're doing the big presentation. We got all of the school board members, to their credit. Principal, superintendent, school board. By the way, if you're going to do safe routes to school, either get those people in the room or don't waste your time. You have to have the decision makers in the room to do what these people had the courage to do. They're all there. By the way, I tell that story. Woman in the front row goes, oh, and I said, are you okay? And she goes, I'm the art teacher. I can't believe you remembered that. It was awesome. It was like a crowning moment of the whole thing. They're learning, dang it, and they're using it. So anyway, we have this great conversation. They develop a bunch of recommendations, not the least of which the kids said, we want to do this all the time. If you just do this as a once a fall and spring walk to school day event, then we don't want to hear about it. We want this to be normal, at least a couple days a week. Let's have remote drop-off day. Let us walk through the park. They had all these recommendations. Let's improve the trail. Let's plant a community garden. Put some fruit trees along the portion of the trail in the park. So I've come up with all this really great stuff. But the coolest thing that I've now seen done in other schools around the country is to consider a 5-minute safety delay on the cars at dismissal time. What that means is the cars that line up right in front of the school, if you come right up to the school, you're going to freeze for 5 minutes. You've used this, right? Have you guys used this effectively? Has it worked? I mean, the places where I've seen it done, widely effective. So if you pull up in front of the school, your kid may well be hanging out in the gym for 5 minutes while all the pedestrians and bicyclists leave the school grounds. That allows us to avoid conflicts. Nobody gets run over because no cars are moving until the pedestrians are all clear. What, of course, do you expect to start hearing kids say to their parents? Do not pick me up at the school under any circumstances. I have to sit in the gym for an hour. 5 minutes, right? But to a kid at the end of the school day, that's infinity. So they are saying to their parents, either let me walk home with the walking school bus or pick me up on the other side of the park. Now all the kids are getting a walk. My point is only, you have to have the guts, though, to make that kind of a policy decision, because you can imagine what kind of ballistics some parents go when they're told you're going to sit for 5 minutes. These are the ones, by the way, that are pulling up 30 minutes early to get the good spot in the line. How often do we see that? You guys tell me. At the elementary schools, do you see cars lining up half an hour before release? Some of you do it. That's why you're being so quiet all of a sudden, aren't you? They're doing the old, well, maybe on, when he has piano lessons, but that's the only day, really. Let me be very clear. Two of the things that we often get as pushback on this. These are great ideas, but we don't have the technical know-how. Our engineering staff, we aren't experienced in this stuff. We don't know how to do it. That's baloney. This stuff is well established. There are planners and engineers on your staff, and if they feel like they need more information, there are evolving guidelines. This is a group called the National Association of City Transportation Officials that have been looking at best practices and are compiling that into their urban street guidelines and their bikeway design guidelines. So there's lots of material out there, many more than these, that tell us how to do this stuff well. The technical challenge, I just do not accept that the technical challenge is what's keeping us from doing it. Similarly, I do not accept that expense is keeping us from doing it. People will say, oh, this stuff costs too much. We're going to spend untold billions in just the next year on transportation and development. Think about how much development dollars are going to be spent just in Columbia next year. On housing, on mixed-use development, and all that. There's a lot of money getting poured into building infrastructure. The question that we have is, do we have the community and political will, and you have to have both, don't just send your politicians or your staff out there to do it, everybody collectively, do we have the will to ask for these outcomes? And to stand together so that when somebody sticks their neck out and makes a recommendation and says, let's try one of these new treatments, everybody's behind that person. Said, okay, that's the right answer. I'm going to ask you to step up. That's the last. Remember I said speak up, act up, step up? By your behavior. And I'm presuming some of you are already doing this. Maybe you all do it all the time. Maybe you're walking and biking all the time. But if you're not, or if you possibly could, look for another opportunity and ideally bring someone else along who's not there yet. Bring a kid or bring an adult you know. Let's say, hey, let's go get something to eat at the cafe and let's walk. Or let's hop on our bikes. We can ride the trail to that. No, the trail doesn't get there. No, it does. The trail gets there. Come on, I'll show you. I'll ride you there. In other words, I like this picture. I'm glad these ladies are all out running, but I really like this guy who's taking a functional trip on his bike. That's the win from a public health standpoint. See, they're geeks, and they're going to find a way. They're training for some marathon or something. I like them. They're great. Wonderful. Great legs, right? Good for you. Keep it up. Not my target. I want this guy, and I want these two right here to grow up as physically active, free-range kids. Here's why I'm so adamant about this. I'll tell you my last story, I promise. I'm in Plainfield, Indiana, small town outside of Indianapolis, not really a suburb, further out than that, in which they have a great trail called the White Lick Creek Trail, in which they had, the summer I was there visiting, they had just put that bridge in, connecting a portion of the trail which connects neighborhoods to a YMCA/community center to, now with this new branch, they're downtown, the older park, in the older section of town where the baseball fields for the Little League are and so on. We're there riding bikes, doing an audit and taking pictures and everything. I asked this woman, do you mind if I take a picture? She goes, no, not at all. I said, so they just put this bridge in, right? Is it nice? Does it make a difference? She goes, oh my gosh, it's been a lifesaver. And I said, lifesaver, really? That's pretty strong. And I'm thinking, why, it's a bridge, right? It's nice. I'm glad it connects. And then she offers this story without much, no, I didn't ask. She just offered this. She goes, well, yeah, we're kind of going through a tough time. My daughter, Sarah, the little girl in the back, is going through treatment for a form, I think, of childhood leukemia, but it required her to take an immunosuppressant drug for the treatment that she was taking, which made her vulnerable to colds and things. They said, so while she's on this cycle, this treatment cycle, we'd really like her to try to avoid her playing with other little kids and getting a cold. Plus, she's uncomfortable, the treatments and so on, going through all of that. And, there's a young mom. She says, it's really been hard. She says, but the one time she's happy is when we go for these bike rides. She laughs and giggles, and we can go out and go watch the Little League games, go to the playground. So she feels like she's not just a baby in a bubble. Pretty compelling, right? And she says, I wouldn't do this if I had to ride along a busy road, or if there's going to be all the gases from cars and stuff. But because we have these trails, I feel comfortable riding with her. I can do it on this trail network. Wow. So I'm thinking, as a parent, I get emotional when I tell this story, so I don't always tell it, because it was really compelling to me as a parent. I don't care if that bridge cost $1 million. It was worth it, obviously, right? Because if it changed their lives that much and was that good for that little girl. But then it reminded me that that's actually, Sarah's a euphemism for lots of people in the community. Like maybe the elderly woman who can't drive anymore and whose kids are now debating whether mom's got to be institutionalized. But maybe, and she's begging, by the way, please let me just stay in the house that I raised you kids in. All I want to do is spend my final years in this same home. I don't want to have to leave it. But maybe because she can now walk to that community center, not on a busy road, but on this nice protected trail, and go to that senior program they have there, they decide she can hang there. Or maybe it's the latchkey kid, the kid of a single mom who's working 2 jobs, who comes home to an empty house, and she says, you get inside and lock the door. It's the one place I know you're safe. But now, because of the trails, she says, if you and your buddies want to walk on the trail to the after-school program at the community center or go to the fields and play, as long as the 3 of you together, you take your cell phone, you tell me you're going to be on the trail, you guys can do that. That's who Sarah stands for. I'm a raving, froth-at-the-mouth lunatic about this stuff, not for anybody in the room except for our little friends right there. Because they deserve better than we have given them in this country. We did a pretty bad job the last 40 or 50 years. We thought mostly about our convenience and the freedom that the car gave us, right? Yeah. Freedom from health, it turns out. I'm a raving lunatic because those are my kids who are now 16 and 18, but I've frozen them in time at 3 and 5, as I tell everybody, to remind me they're the first generation that's going to end up with statistically shorter life expectancies than their parents because of the diseases of sedentary lifestyles, guys. We built a world where they couldn't be free range, and now the price we're going to pay is they're going to end up with statistically shorter lifestyles than us. We can do better. We know how. A lot of it's being done here, but you got to do a lot more. Because we've got to go from what I call winning battles, nice bike trail here, good development there, to winning the war. The entire fabric of our communities has to become this. So I challenge you to do that. I am honored and privileged that you've taken the time tonight to hear this conversation. And I figure the very fact that you're here tells me you're the ones already making a difference. But please don't give up. Do it more. Drag others in. Use this argument if you have to, and keep up the great work. Thank you guys very much. Really a privilege.